Hello, BookTube. America had a federal holiday in the middle of the work week, and this has caused many, many people to just take the whole week off or a chunk of the week off, so that even now, when the holiday is over, people are still very much in a holiday frame of mind, and probably aided and abetted by the fact that the entirety of the country is blanketed under a heat wave. Uh, that holiday frame of mind, I've found with a lot of people, except for probably all of us freaks on BookTube, tends to include a holiday from reading. People tend to just lounge around and watch movies or binge on TV shows. And while I was thinking about that today, I was reminded of a long-standing heresy on this channel of mine, where I have maintained right from the beginning for years now, that contrary to the popular pieties of the reading community, the movie adaptation of a book is almost always better than the book. I get a lot of flack for that opinion, especially when I used to go to literary events and parties, because it's totally wrong for a book person to say that, or so it seems. But I wanted to give a list of some of the movies that I have in mind, and then we'll talk about Netflix. But first I wanted to say one of the bedrock reasons why I say that is something that a lot of readers don't like to confront, which is that not a lot of novels are very good. If novelists content themselves with merely delivering strong dramatic beats with vivid imagery, and I shouldn't say merely, because most novelists can't do that. That's not a small thing. That's actually, careers can be built on being able to do that. But if a novelist does only that, for whatever reason, either that's the limit of their talent or that's as much work as they want to do for a paycheck, one way or another, if they do that, they really can't complain, nor can their readers. If somebody comes along and says, well, the movie version of your book was better. And why? Because movies do that better. Movies deliver strong dramatic beats and vivid imagery much better than books do. It just stands to reason that they would. I mean, a book is a solo production, usually grinded out in all kinds of varying moods, not a consistent high of creativity for every book that's written that way, like the Le Rouge et Noir or The Monk. There are books that are dragged out of their authors by hammer and pitons for over months or even years. Whereas a movie, the director can work in white heat of creativity the whole time. And not only that, but the director has a large crew of talented people, some of whom might be more talented, helping with the process. A director has a cast, a director has a crew, a director has a DOP, a director has all kinds of things that a solitary writer doesn't have. So if your goal is to deliver strong dramatic beats with vivid imagery, that's what movies are for. If that's all you do as a novelist is write a gussied up screenplay, you can't really complain if an actual screenplay outdoes your book. The distinction that I make here is one that you can often see by what I don't include, by examples that I don't include. The distinction that I make here is between things that a novelist can do that a movie director usually can't. The things that a novel can do that are not also things that a movie can do. There are a handful of them. They're much harder to do, which probably accounts for the fact that so few novelists can actually pull them off. But like, for instance, narrative texture. Most current novelists coming out of workshop programs in America and the UK these days don't even know what that is, much less be able to master it and pull it off. But it's something that almost no movie can do. By virtue of the fact that movies are composite creations, almost none of them can do it. Novels also can create a sense of lived time, the fourth dimension, the chronological dimension. Novels can do that in a way that movies just can't, by their very nature. You are not going to be sitting in a movie for the entire lifetime of a character. So if a novelist can effectively create that feeling, which some of them can, then their book is going to create an experience in you that the movie version cannot possibly duplicate. You could assemble a really talented crew and a director who knows what they're doing, and you could try and film a novella of William Trevor. But as we saw just in the current collection of the last stories of William Trevor, there are two novellas, two short stories in that collection that utilized one of Trevor's signature things. It was his ability to collapse time into a story and make you feel it as if it were real. That director and crew could try until the cows come home, and they probably wouldn't be able to duplicate that. Also, another thing that novelists can do, it's very hard to do, but if they do it, no movie could possibly duplicate it, is that feeling of immersion. I know you know what I mean because you're all readers. That feeling when you are immersed in a book. Literally, when you are floating around inside a new atmosphere, and the atmosphere is the book, and you don't want to leave it, and you lose track of your orientation, you forget your way back. The number of movies that can do that is vanishingly small. Movies, by their nature, don't do that well. So if you're a novelist who seeds all of the stuff that novels can do that movies can't, and just stick to the things that movies can do, then it stands to reason that a movie adaptation of your work will outdo you. I don't know why some readers feel insecure admitting that. They know that it's true. But I have an example here. I've got 10 examples of movies, either modern or classic, that illustrate what I'm talking about. Starting with, for instance, these are all things I've mentioned on this channel before, but starting with Tom Clancy's The Hunt for Red October, which is one extended info dump. It's just one enormous, turgid info dump. It has virtually no dramatic tension at all. John McTiernan did a movie version that is a classic. It's fantastic. It makes obvious dramatic choices that Tom Clancy, it never even occurred to him to do, and if it had occurred to him, he wouldn't have done them. He would have thought, that's a distraction. That's not the kind of book I'm trying to write. Totally his right to do it. He certainly crowed about that right all the way to the bank. But nevertheless, in terms of delivering the story, the John McTiernan movie is much better. Or what about The Godfather? Francis Ford Coppola directed The Godfather. Took Mario Puzo's book is an absolute mess of sexism and racism and sketchy writing and incomplete plot points. It's an absolute mess. And Coppola makes it genius from beginning to end. The experience is 10 times better. And also, when you get a director like Coppola, someone whose force of personality just dominates every single aspect of their work, you can actually get someone who creates a narrative texture that runs throughout the whole thing. It happens in The Godfather and adds to the allure. And it's not present in Puzo's novel. What else have I got here? William Wyler's 1959 version of Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur has been adapted for the screen many times. I always get a kick out of Cinematis, who say, oh, come on, man. This current age of remakes and redos, it's just shows such a poverty of imagination. What about the great old days of our grandfather's movie theater? What about Ben-Hur? I always want to point out, I love pointing out to them that the Ben-Hur they're talking about was itself a remake. But any version of Ben-Hur is going to be an improvement over Lew Wallace's Stew-Fest of a book. It's a very, very 19th century book in all the bad ways. All the bricolage, all the big, heavy, coated furniture. Just Ben-Hur is a trial to read. And the movie Ben-Hur, the 1959 Billy Wilder movie, is not a trial to watch, to say the least. Also, a modern example would be the Steven Spielberg adaptation of Ernest Cline's Ready Player One. Ready Player One, the novel, is a harkback, a nostalgia fest. Steven Spielberg is an expert at that. Takes all, but in addition to being a harkback and a nostalgia fest, Ernest Cline's novel is also poorly done. It's shoddily written, and it has no dramatic arc. And Steven Spielberg gives it both of those. He removes the shoddy writing, and he infuses a dramatic arc. He infuses the arc that's there with drama, so that you actually feel it and care about it. Tobe Hooper's 1979 adaptation of Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Salem's Lot is, in my opinion, the most technically gifted of Stephen King's novels. The only one, I think, one of the only ones that can actually stand as a work of fiction. It's remarkably good. And the Tobe Hooper movie adaptation really captures a lot of the things it's going for. The small town feel, the local feel. It also helps that they pull in a whole roster of fantastic actors and actresses. And the horror feels wonderfully done. And one of the things that you notice about it when you watch is that he cares as much about human-on-human drama and horror as he does the supernatural horror. If you watch this movie version of Salem's Lot, I feel certain that one of the scenes that will stick in your mind the longest has no supernatural element whatsoever. A man walks in on another man with his wife in bed, and the scene that follows is brilliant movie making, and it doesn't have a vampire anywhere in it until the very end, the very last second of that scene. But the impact of the scene is totally human, and there are many moments like that. Characters in this movie grieve, and when they're frightened, they're actually frightened. You can see it. You can feel this creeping horror that has entered into the town. You can feel it undercutting their certainties of what they thought they were. That's wonderfully done. And then we've also got Clint Eastwood's movie version of The Bridges of Madison County. The Robert James Waller book is a mess. It's just it's a greeting card on a little bit of steroids, very weak steroids. Whereas the movie is beautiful. The movie infuses it with vision that is nowhere in the book, and doesn't change much. So you get, it's a very, very thin story. In the book, it's just gruel, it's just broth, and it's horrible. I don't know if the book was a massive success because it delivers its dramatic beats with vivid imagery in a very easy way and takes about as long to watch as it does to read. But the movie has great performances. The movie gives a granularity to it that is absent from the book. Also, same thing with Scott Hicks' movie version of Snow Falling on Cedars. Snow Falling on Cedars, the novel, has some very good ideas and one good scene, but nothing other than that. It's just atmosphere other than that. And sometimes the atmosphere is laid on with a trowel very heavy-handedly, whereas in the movie, it's all very precise. It's all the twin goal of dramatic beats and vivid imagery is realized perfectly. Same thing with Sidney Lumet's 1974 version of Murder on the Orient Express, which is the most gimmicky of all of Agatha Christie's novels, which is saying something. It's a great gimmick. It's an absolutely fantastic gimmick. One of her long-standing rivals in the mystery writing genre at the time read it and was, according to her family, furious for days. And when she calmed down enough to explain why, her reason was very simple. She was furious that she hadn't thought of that gimmick. And that's true with a lot of Agatha Christie's gimmicks, but this one's the gimmick to end all gimmicks. And that will work. A gimmick will work on the page as well as it will on the screen. But the screen version has, again, a massively talented cast of actors that bring nuance to characters that in Christie's original have no nuance. So you get the gimmick and the pacing and all of that, and the main character is wonderfully done, but you also get all sorts of... Imagine if in the book version of Murder on the Orient Express, Agatha Christie had done what, for instance, Elizabeth George does, and give us 2 pages of character background and development for everybody. Imagine if she'd done that. Imagine how much better the book would be if that were true. Instead, we don't get that. We get very quick sketches. In the movie, we get that in a beautiful way, beautifully done. And then next would be Robert Zemeckis' adaptation of Winston Groom's Forrest Gump. The book is syrup from start to finish. The movie is also syrup, but it's moving. It's movingly done in a way that I didn't find the book to be at all. And then number 10 is another Roman movie. This is the 1960 Stanley Kubrick version of Spartacus. Now, I'm not meaning to knock Howard Fast's novel. His novel is really good. But the movie has an epic sweep to it that Fast, in some chapters, tries for and fails to achieve. You can see him trying and you can see him failing. Same thing with Lew Wallace in Ben-Hur. You can see him trying for something and not succeeding. Whereas the movie succeeds. So it's the same thing, but much better done. much better done on the only grounds that the novel stakes out for itself. Those are 10 examples of what I'm talking about. But I also have 10 examples from Netflix right now, from Netflix US right now, that I wanted to recommend to you. The first one being a series. I think it's the only series on here, and that's Longmire, which is the adaptation of Craig Johnson's murder mystery series set in the American West, in the contemporary American West. The series is fantastic. The books are fantastic, but the series is so good. Just watch the first one, and if you're not hooked, then I will ball up this list and have it with mayonnaise. The next one is G.J. Caruso adapted I Am Number 4, a YA novel by an author who goes under the name Pittacus Lore. And I Am Number 4 is, like a lot of YA science fiction fantasy, it's just nonsense. From beginning to end, it's just nonsense. It does all the YA things that irritate everybody except YA fanatics. The apotheosis of high school romance over everything, over literally everything, in this case interstellar war and interstellar genocide, take a backseat to a boy falling in love with a girl. And it doesn't matter if the characters in the book decry that as silly. If it still happens, it's still silly. And the movie that Caruso makes out of it isn't any less silly. It isn't any less ridiculous than the book, but it's got amazing visuals, whereas the book does not. The Pittacus Lore, the author who goes under the pen name of Pittacus Lore, can't write their way out of a wet paper bag. Whereas the Caruso gives the movie some wonderful visual extended scenes. The interpersonal scenes, the acting scenes, not so much, but the action stuff, which is most of the movie and most of the book, is really, really well done. Same thing would be true for almost any YA adaptations on the screen. For instance, the Maze Runner movies are infinitely more absorbing even than the very effective Maze Runner books, because the books aren't trying to do anything other than what the movie can do. But what else have we got here? Oh, well, a classic example would be Steven Spielberg's movie version of Jurassic Park, which is on Netflix now. I'm very happy to see the first three Jurassic Park movies are on Netflix, and the first one, Michael Crichton was not a good writer. I hate to say it. I said it to his face, and I say it now. He was not a very good writer. His prose creaks. It's easy. It's cheap. It's distractible, and nothing distracts Spielberg. Nothing whatsoever. So that he's actually able to zero in on the heart of the book. He changes quite a bit, but he zeroes in on the heart of the book in a way that it's no good saying, he tells a different story than Michael Crichton does. Michael Crichton would have written the book version of Spielberg's movie if he could have. It's just Spielberg is a better storyteller. That's all. Also, it's the only movie I know that has a car chase in a tree. I don't even still know how that happens and gets to be exciting. And then the next one would be John Huston's adaptation of the African Queen, which has the huge benefit of Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, and is tremendously good. I love the novel, but the novel is not anywhere near as effective. The movie strips it down to the only things that it does, which is dramatic beats and vivid imagery. Only then it wraps it in fantastic acting, so that although I should point out that two of the movies on this list, I'm giving you 10 from Netflix right now, and two of the movies on this list are really good. They're really good movie adaptations of their book, but they're not better. Two of them are not examples of what I'm talking about. I wonder if I didn't tell you if you'd know. But the next one is Stephen Daldry's adaptation of Bernard Schlink's The Reader, his novel The Reader. The novel's loathsome. Not only is it thin and weak, but it's also disgusting. The more you think about what it's trying to say, the more disgusting you become. The more disgusted you become with it. And the movie avoids all of that. The movie avoids the moral culpability of the novel almost completely, and marries it with some great performances, so that the movie ends up being so much more enjoyable than the book. Also, Sam Mendes did an adaptation of Richard Yates's Revolutionary Road. Richard Yates has his fans among the martini nostalgic, He-Men, bring everything back to the 1950s, Don Draper type reader, but he doesn't warrant them. He doesn't earn them, in my opinion. Revolutionary Road is just a block of unfrozen meat. And the movie hews away. The movie gets at the center of the story in a wonderful, wonderful way. The movie is much more engrossing than the book could ever hope to be. Then next we have Charlie St. Cloud, which is a movie directed by Bert Steers, starring Zac Efron. And it's an adaptation of a novel called The Death and Life of Charlie St. Cloud by Ben Sherwood. And it's a very similar thing to Forrest Gump, where the movie version really should have taken off. It's a shame that it didn't become more popular. It's tremendously good, tremendously visually effective, and tremendously moving in a way that the book is not. The book is mostly schmaltz, and the movie is not. The movie is very schmaltzy, but it has a lot more self-awareness and self-confidence than the novel. I firmly believe that if you read the novel and then watched the movie, you would enjoy the experience of the movie better and get the same story out of each. And then we have a little bit of a controversial one that I think this is fairly new on Netflix. This is an adaptation by Kari Toji Fukunaga of The Beasts of No Nation by Uzodinma Iweala. And the book is not good. It's not politically correct today to say that it's not good. It is. I know people in university courses and also out there in the general reading world who consider it to be the fifth gospel, and it's not. it's not. It's only marginally effective, and that mostly the book, mostly from shock value, and the movie, the adaptation doesn't do any of that. The adaptation, again, hews straight to the story and does a fantastic job. I loved it in a way that it never occurred to me to love the book. And then we have the two movie adaptations that aren't as good as their books. They're really, really good, but their novelists do things that the movie version can't do, even in the hands of a great director. And the first one of those is Thomas Alfredson's adaptation of John le Carré's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. The new adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, not the TV series, but the movie. A tremendous cast, really, really well done. Great dramatic beats, great arresting visuals, but I feel certain that reading the book will please you more than seeing the movie, and in different ways. You'll still get the dramatic beats, but the movie also has that kind of, the thing I mentioned, the narrative texture, that a director can either pull that off or they can't, and the movie version does not. But the book, the book very much does. And then the last one is a terrific novel, absolutely fantastic novel. A novel by a novelist who knows exactly what novels can do that cannot ever be duplicated on the screen. So not only is the novel a more rewarding experience, but it's a totally different experience. And this is Curtis Hanson's directed version of James Ellroy's L.A. Confidential. Ellroy is an acquired taste. He is a very rare example of a dude bro author who's also blindingly talented. So the thing I always accuse dude bro authors of is that they take the novel reading experience and reduce it to a series of dopamine hits, so that it's very much like playing some sort of video game. And therefore, you don't have to worry with all the artsy-fartsy lace and curtain stuff of Edith Wharton or Virginia Woolf. And I often deride them for that. But even that, as a narrative technique, can be raised to the level of art if somebody does it right. Richard Price is a perfect example of an author who does that, but does it so brilliantly that you don't mind, that you can't complain. And Ellroy's the same way. Just, you have to get used to it. But once you get used to it, L.A. Confidential is a fantastic novel. The Cold 6000, I think, is a classic of American literature, even though a lot of people who don't get on the wavelength of what it's trying to do would find it literally unreadable. But the movie version, as I'm sure you've all seen it, and the movie version also tremendously effective, telling a small sliver of what goes on in the novel, but telling it really well. So all of those 10 are on Netflix US right now. But I just wanted to, since I'm sure that a lot of you are still in holiday mode, I wanted to make a list of some of these things that are just really, really good. If you're not reading books, if you're reading movies, if you're watching movies that made from books. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.